Welcome back to For All Kerbalkind. Today, the Astral Foundation reveals its newly developed supersonic aircraft, the KR-71 Blackbird. Peter and Alan are the chosen pilots to test the vehicle's mettle. Their mission is to discover the difference between its theoretical and practical operational limits. In order to do this, we'll have to say goodbye to Brownsville, Texas for a while, departing the holding pattern with a Mach 0.999 pass. One hell of a farewell. We'll be exploring different speeds at different altitudes, and for the majority of the test flight today, this will be far faster than the speed of sound. And flying over the Gulf of Mexico ensures the only people that will be annoyed with the resulting sonic booms we'll be creating are various fishermen and other naval vessels along our flight path. Our first test will be to find a comfortable cruising speed at a respectable altitude, then perform shallow dives and climbs, monitoring stability, speed, and thermals all the while. The aim is to find out what the vehicle is capable of. For our own uses, sure, but primarily as a showcase for the United States military, who are very keen to get their hands on the design should it prove useful. The US is in a little bit of a pickle regarding reconnaissance operations. The past few years have seen the demise of a meant-to-be-secret spy satellite program, Discoverer, entirely compromised by Soviet action in orbit. This led to the development of Dinosaur, a crewed vehicle capable of similar spying on any location in the world from orbit. However, downsides to its operations include, but are not limited to, time needed to refurbish each vehicle after returning to the Earth, the practical impossibility of hiding its liftoff, as, well, rocket launches are quite obvious after all, and the quite limited window of use, that being a few days at most, to name a few. With the KR-71's capability of air-to-air refueling, albeit yet to be performed by the Foundation, prolonging its ability to perform reconnaissance and project military power, while boasting the inability to be intercepted by any missile or otherwise, all while being much cheaper to build and capable of flying multiple sorties a day. Yeah, Dinah's role may be changing as the Blackbird steps up to the plate. The maiden flight has proven quite successful. The top speed recorded as Mach 3.36, reaching an altitude of 24 kilometers, and bringing critical thermal percentage to 95%. It's safe to say the limits were pushed today. The United States will likely be operating these vehicles in the near future, hopefully gathering valuable intel on Soviet activity in the background. And meanwhile, we get to keep this Blackbird as a supersonic testbed of sorts. The first addition to be made, a parachute for landing. It's sort of an oversight on the part of the engineers, but all is well. Hopefully this vehicle's future is a bright one. December 22nd, 1965. Several hours before sunrise, a Chiton 3 has been readied in Brownsville, Texas, with a relatively secret mission. All that's been revealed to the public is that it intends to visit the K4 research outpost currently in orbit. Debates on whether the payload is resupply, new hardware, or some sort of weapon carry on as the countdown to liftoff reaches 0. This particular vehicle is derived from the KX-20 launch hardware, removing the spaceplane and the 1205 boosters, and instead having attached a Gemini docking hardware compatible with the K4, power supply, lights, and cameras, meant for remote-controlled docking. Although its objective is secret to many, in actuality, the vehicle was put together for one objective: deorbiting the K4 station. Now, there are a handful of reasons why the Foundation is looking to destroy this outpost. First and foremost, security. Soviet activity has been rather ambitious as of late, first failing to operate a habitat for 30 days in orbit of the Earth, but then jumping right to sending 2 Kerbals on a flyby right around Venus and back. And we know they are capable of rendezvous back when Discoverer was compromised. Long story short, we don't want the Soviets to commandeer our space station while we aren't able to monitor it. The majority of the program's attention is on Trinity flights to the moon at this time. So, aside from this, the station has run its course and completed what it intended to. Supply is low, systems are already becoming outdated, solar panel degradation is increasing every day, And, well, we will soon have the means to create much more robust orbital infrastructure. Think modular stations that can be manned 24/7. The technology is almost there, and we'll be focusing on that route after the initial Trinity explorations have run their course. As you can see, however, the deorbit stage of the rocket has experienced an engine failure, dooming the mission to failure. Communication is cut, and the stage spins until it meets its oblivion, breaching the Earth's atmosphere. The mission was called In Ignem 1, Latin for Into Flames, and, well, it definitely did live up to its name. It's unclear whether more funding and time will be directed towards a second attempt to destroy the station anytime soon, but I suppose it leaves us more time to either solidify our stance or change our mind if there arises some use for the degrading outpost. If you've got any ideas for the K4 research outpost, let me know in the comments below. February 21st, 1966. The sun sets as light scatters across the Gulf of Mexico. The Cateran 5 stands tall and ready for the coming storm of fire. Moments before, Alan, Scott, and Gus have completed ingress aboard Trinity, picking up where the backup crew left off on the several-hour-long startup procedures and checklists. It's going to be a long night for ground crew and mission teams, as this is about to be the very first night launch of a Cateran rocket. Earth's axial tilt, coupled with the latitude of our launch site in Texas, means the launch window's time of day changes throughout the year consistently. To put it simply, during the summer months we will see day launches to the moon, and during the winter months there will be night launches. This is quite a simplistic view, as we are able to launch for the moon at any given time at odd inclinations, but for the straightforward approach we've been using throughout this series, that's that. Now darkness begins to settle in as Trinity 4's countdown creeps ever closer to liftoff, leaving tension in the air. After inboard cutoff, the moment the center F1 engine purposefully shuts down to minimize G-loads on the crew during the coming separation, the mission loses another F1 engine. For a moment, warning lights flash and the command to abort is considered. However, the guidance system is able to keep the vehicle on course, and Trinity 4 remains go. This is the benefit multiple engines on a rocket stage provides: an exponential increase to the reliability of the vehicle. Stages that only have one engine will entirely fail if a problem occurs. But with our Cateran vehicles, showcased in several Cateran 1 flights as well, we can shrug off would-have-been catastrophic events with ease. This is a benefit the Soviets' N1 rocket has as well, although some iterations struggled with this still. Too many engines failing without proper gimbal to compensate for thrust irregularities has caused a failure before, so there's definitely a sweet spot between having enough but not too many engines, and it's something that will be considered for future vehicle designs for sure. The crew of 3 reach orbit, assess systems, and burn for the moon, all things going well. When the time comes to perform transposition and docking, however, a problem finally occurs. As the command and service module detaches from the K4 transfer stage, the LEM behind it also wriggles free as well. It was meant to stay tethered down, allowing the weight of the K4 to provide stability for the docking maneuver to come. Unlike the future rendezvous while returning from the surface of the moon, docking with the LEM at this point is an active to passive maneuver. That being, nobody is in the LEM to ensure its orientation remains still. Now floating free, it becomes considerably more stressful of a maneuver. The vehicle's ever so slowly tumbling through space, and it's up to the crew of 3 to maneuver Trinity into a controlled tumble to match its position and speed. Not to mention, one wrong bump could cause the LEM to tumble faster, rendering the landing incompletable. So it's safe to say the tension is high inside mission control and the spacecraft alike. After careful monitoring, approach, virtual tethering, and several attempts at lining up correctly, we have hard dock. Now, onwards to the moon. Our objective for this flight is to land somewhere in the Oceanus Procellarum, known as the Ocean of Storms. Dismayingly, the captured lunar inclination we have arrived at doesn't really provide us with a whole lot of options or room for error in this regard. We will have access to the very southern edge of the biome using a slight inclination maneuver. And, well, the contract we're meant to complete is called Targeted Lunar Landing, so it'll be good practice for us to try to hit a basically pinpoint target on the lunar surface. On Trinity 3, we actually attempted to target landing near the Surveyor 4, and midway through the descent burn it became evident we would overshoot, and we actually burned backwards to correct, and, well, this coupled with starting our descent from a higher than ideal altitude is what caused the absolutely bonkers touchdown with 1 meters per second of delta V remaining in the descent stage. Calling that close is an understatement, but it was our first attempt at a targeted landing, and will only get better with practice. Trinity 4 now descending to the surface adds to our experience in this regard, with a new method of determining the point of powered descent and a lower lunar orbital altitude to begin from. Still only our second crewed lunar landing, we end up just barely missing the intended biome. Turns out we were both too short for one valid landing spot, but we also overshot another, ending up right in between 2 of them, and touching down in the lowlands biome instead of the Ocean of Storms. Well, no matter, we've brought something new with us on this flight. Tucked away in one of the descent stage panels hides a car specifically designed for lunar traversal, dubbed the LRV. Scott and Ellen grab a few beers from storage, hop in the vehicle, and start on their way northwest in an effort to reach the intended landing area and plant a flag there, which will end up being a several-hour-long journey across the endless gray of beautiful desolation.
Are we there yet?
Not yet.
Hey, are we there yet?
No.
Well, are we there yet? No. Are we there yet? Yes. Really? No. Are we there yet?
No.
Are we there yet? No, we are not. Are we there yet? No. Are we there yet? Hey, that's not funny. Hey, that's really immature.
Really immature.
All right,
You're lost.
I'm gonna just stop talking.
Finally.
But this is taking forever. There ain't no in-flight movie enough.
Ah! Are we there yet?
Yes.
Oh, finally.
After antagonizing both Alan and Capcom with Scott's impatience, the 2 finally arrive at the Ocean of Storms, able to plant a flag and make the return drive back to the lander. And making our way back to the LEM, an absolutely game-breaking bug occurred. When the LEM didn't straight up disintegrate upon reaching render range, the game at this point becomes unsavable. I cannot save the game, go to the tracking station or space center, swap to a vessel in map view, nothing except for loading a previous save. The only workaround being to delete the LEM from the save, drive to where it would be, and add it back via craft splicing of another save. Although doable, this easily becomes absolutely unplayable once lunar operations gets a bit more complex here on the surface. This is actually the reason why my previous Realism Overhaul series, N9SA, has abruptly stopped, this exact bug. So finding it again in For All Kerbalkind was disheartening. That is until the fix was finally found. I have spent ages tweaking with craft, uninstalling mods, messing with various settings and methods of reaching the craft, even trying different game versions promising to have fixed this bug to no avail. And just when I lost all hope entirely, Simav on the RO Discord sends one little message. Yeah, just try deleting Making History. Well, I didn't expect this to work, as I haven't touched the DLCs this entire playthrough, so their parts and changes should simply be sitting there dormant, doing absolutely nothing. So, I deleted Squad Expansion from game data, and rebooted the game, expecting no difference at all, and the bug wasn't there anymore. I could leave render range and come back, and the game no longer threw up all over itself for some unknown, bizarre reason. This absolutely game-breaking bug is just sitting there with the DLCs like a poison waiting to strike, in plain sight, unassumingly, for all this time. So now we're able to continue our way off of the lunar surface and back to the command and service module in orbit, happily knowing this bug has officially been squashed forever, not just here, but in N9SA as well, meaning that series has been saved, and I may stream it on Twitch again soon. I really hope the bug somehow doesn't come back, but it seems it's finally been dealt with once and for all. Back to our mission at hand. Alan and Scott climb their way back into the capsule before saying farewell to the ascent stage. Up next, a short burn of the main engine adjusts our orbital eccentricity to above 0.10 for the final phase of our lunar operations, deploying a small satellite. This sub-satellite is named TESS, and off the top of my head, I don't actually remember what the acronym stands for, but essentially it is a small deep space core with 2 experiments on board, measuring solar plasma and radiometry, I believe, with science collecting over time for the next 3 months. No propulsion is on board, but reaction wheels will ensure solar panels and experiments can be oriented at will. Its passive mission will be to become a small part of the growing lunar communications network, which will help farside operations communicate back to the Earth. And speaking of, it's about time the crew of Trinity 4 return home. The immediate future of the Trinity program will be much of the same as seen here for the next few missions at least, which is why I opted for a less cinematic and a more straightforward summary of the flight this time around. We do have a very time-intensive cinematic of Trinity 3 for that, but it's nice to show what the actual gameplay of a lunar mission is like too. But 5, 6, and 7 will be performing very similar missions, with the latter 2 actually having contracts to drive somewhere on the lunar surface, so it's a good thing we've demonstrated the feasibility of that already. 8 and onwards is still undergoing mission planning, as lunar stations or outposts may be in the lineup after that time, and we'll just have to wait around and see. For now, we decided to do something a little different for the return into the atmosphere. Normally, an Apollo capsule would somewhat dip in and out of atmospheric plasma during a re-entry, to cool the craft from the intense heat, reduce G-load on the crew, and help target a landing zone while falling through the atmosphere. Instead of doing this subtly, Trinity 4 practically skips off of the atmosphere and soars almost back into space on its way back home. Its trajectory was purposefully aimed towards Central America, with the goal of prolonging the re-entry as much as possible in order to reach closer to the United States, as an experiment of sorts. This ended up working surprisingly well, as the parachute deploys over the Gulf of Mexico, a far cry from our usual staple landing zone of Mexico itself. Little by little, we're starting to get a hang of landing in safe areas. Next episode, we will be finding out what Markiner 5 is up to on its way to Venus, launching the Trinity 5 mission, and seeing what else we get ourselves into, and reacting to any shenanigans the 2 other players perform in their episodes, which I have a feeling something might be up. I'm not sure, but until then, I'd like to give a special thank you to Spitfire08, Chris Gebhardt, Alvis the Holmes, Dake Raybon, Captain Scotland, Williams Plays, Elliot Ewing, Odin, Mr. Blue Star, Caden Seward, Kerbal Master, and everyone else on the Patreon for your support. Thank you all so much for watching, and peace out.